from what I've seen is that people aren't caught up in ideology. You've got people from the right and the left that they're really just looking at it the way they see it and reporting it the way they see it.
Last week, the Washington Post broke a story that back in late September, while the world was fixated on the $700 billion bailout debate, the U.S. Treasury Department quietly changed part of the tax code, and in doing so, created a $140 billion tax break for the banks, a fact that supposedly went unnoticed by lawmakers when they agreed to support the bailout bill. Real News senior editor Paul J. spoke to Danny Schechter, editor of MediaChannel.org, to find out more about the tax break development.
Thanks for joining us, Danny.
Pleasure, Paul.
So let's start a bit. What is this $140 billion tax break?
Well, this was a measure given to the banks to allow them some accounting rule changes as they merge with other or buy up other banks. So it's really a sort of a present to the banking community. And it seems like the whole bailout has turned into a way to subsidize banks or so-called stabilize these banks. That's what they're saying, by promoting concentration in the banking sector. So far, this does not help any of the homeowners who need help, and it doesn't stimulate the economy.
So the tax breaks that make mergers easier and more tax advantageous to the banks, something that the banks and much of the Republican Party have been fighting for without success until they snuck this into this bill.
Well, that was one of the measures snuck in. Of course, the Democrats insisted at the time that there would be transparency, that they would monitor everything closely. Now, a few weeks later, they're saying there is no transparency. They really don't know how the money is being spent, and they're not very happy about it. In other words, the money has been given to banks with no conditions. There's been no attempt to ensure that the banks even lend more money out. So this whole bailout could be turning into a farce, except people really don't even know what's going on for the most part. And, you know, this is part of the pity of it all. We thought it was $700 billion. They always said, well, it might be a little bit more, like $1 trillion. We have no idea what the cap on it is.
Danny, are we to believe that nobody from the Democratic Party actually read this bill and couldn't see this tax break was there?
Well, I think they read the bill, but, you know, I think this was an executive decision by the Treasury Department, which has a lot of power on its own, you know, that it's not answerable to Congress necessarily. So you have these different competing power centers. That's what makes it hard for Bush or Obama to actually have a decisive program to rescue or revive the economy.
Certainly, whether it's overlooked or not overlooked, and it's hard to believe that there aren't people within the Democratic Party that knew about this tax break. But at any rate, the whole fundamental thrust of this bill of $700 billion so far has been to hand money to banking institutions that now we know are using it for executive compensation, are in fact using it to give money back to shareholders, and not all that much is actually turning into increased liquidity, especially for consumers. But Obama's been part of this, and we haven't heard him critique much of the bill. So what do you make of what to expect from Obama?
You know, I think Obama is trying to, you know, keep things going for a honeymoon and a fresh start. I don't think he wants to get sucked into the vortex of this debate right now, where he really doesn't have the power to impose his program or try to push his program. And that's why, for example, when he asked President Bush to bail out Detroit, and Bush said he'd do it only if, you know, Obama would agree to support, you know, the free trade agreement with Colombia, you know, it was sort of check and checkmate once again. I think Obama is trying not to get sucked into this kind of political dance.
That trade-off that Bush offered, I know was reported in the press. I guess no one's exactly sure whether that conversation took place, but it seems a bizarre trade-off with a free trade agreement for Colombia against the destruction of the American auto industry.
Absolutely. You know, and that's what I'm saying, is that I don't think even to this day, a lot of these politicians have a clear understanding of what's actually happening here to American citizens, the people who are losing their homes, the people who are losing their jobs. And their priorities seem to be to conform with it, with some sort of economic recovery program that's not reaching the people who need it most.
There's going to be a big fight about recovery for who, stimulus for who, on one side, who pays for it, on the other side, who gets it. And certainly one of the questions being raised on the auto industry is if there is going to be some kind of bailout, is there going to be some kind of public ownership What do you make of what to expect from Obama on that course?
I think that's extremely unlikely. And in fact, the auto industry, General Motors, just announced that it's going to be ending its loan arm, General Motors Acceptance Corporation, which is probably bankrupt. So it seems like the auto industry is going down fast unless somebody steps in right away. And it doesn't seem as if politicians have the shared consensus on what to do to actually act in a timely way. And this is what we've been seeing, in Washington, a failure to act decisively.
Well, Obama seems, at least in terms of language, completely committed to some kind of bailout. But I think, again, the question is going to be what kind of structure is the bailout? If it's another Wall Street kind of bailout that just hands money over.
And also the expectations, for Obama to act are very high, but Obama's not in power yet. He's not in office, and he cannot impose his economic agenda. So, he's trying right now to use what leverage he has to get the Bush administration to do certain things. That doesn't seem to be working. The Congress seems to be still, it's sort of in a jam. Like a gridlock on the roads. And, so I'm sure it's very frustrating for him as well. Plus, he has to decide whose Treasury Secretary is going to be and what his plan is going to be. And I don't know that they've decided that yet.
Well, one of the names being bounced around is Paul Volcker and other people from the Clinton administration. Certainly quite a few of the people that have received some of the critique for the situation being like this. Have we heard any kind of name as a possible Treasury Secretary that's fresh?
Well, Larry Summers is one name, and of course Summers was very controversial, not only when he had to forced to step down at Harvard for his statements about the intelligence of women, but also earlier in his career when he was basically associated with a proposal to dump, pollutants on developing countries. This was exposed years ago. He's another neoliberal, if you will, in the economic sphere, disciple of Robert Rubin. And so I don't think we're seeing any kind of new thinkers here who have any really new ideas about the economy. That's discouraging.
And even the markets seem to be responding both to his election and to the current situation by more or less continually going down. But we see that the extent of layoffs and the extent of the industry pulling back and the extent of continuing falling of the housing market on the whole is deepening very quickly. Obama's going to hit an economy that's even far worse in a few weeks than it is now.
You're absolutely right. And this is why I think it's very important for, folks to realize that Obama does not have the power to impose his will. He doesn't seem to have, FDR's approach yet. But then again, FDR didn't have it when he first took office either. So I think, this is going to be a work of improvisation to some degree. And I think the seriousness of the actual decline of the economy is going to force him to be bolder, perhaps, than he wants to be right now.
And there's going to be a big battle, which is bolder for who, stimulus for who benefits. And right now, the team he's putting into place doesn't suggest there's going to be a change, fundamental change that we were talked about in the campaign. But I guess we will reserve some of our judgments for after he takes office. Thanks for joining us, Danny.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network. Don't forget the donate buttons. Sorry to nag you, but we don't survive without you. Bye-bye. There are times when reality just asserts itself, in spite of the haze created by television news and entertainment. Sometimes crisis rips a tear in the fabric of myth and propaganda. Now a profound economic crisis has ripped asunder the American dream itself. Millions of people losing jobs and homes. They lack proper health care and any real sense of security. Since 2001, workers' wages have fallen or remained stagnant, even though worker productivity has risen almost 33%. By 2006, the top 1% of households were receiving 23% of all pre-tax income, more than double what it was in the 1970s. It's the greatest concentration of income since 1928. As unemployment rises, we need to know why this crisis is happening and what we can do to defend ourselves. Why are wages so low? Why is the society so laden with debt? Is it in ordinary Americans' interest to have a $1 trillion military budget to project power across the globe? Corporate television news won't ask these questions, let alone try to find answers. Only a truly independent news network can tackle these questions with courage and with ordinary people's interests in mind. We need a news network that's independent of corporations, governments, and political parties. We need the real news. But there won't be a real news network unless we raise substantial funds right away. The current financial crisis has hit our funding hard. Together, we do have the power to turn it around. There are already hundreds of thousands of people watching the real news every month. If everyone pitches in, we can build an internet and cable television network that will change the face of media forever. You can organize house parties, talk to friends at school and at work, send email blasts and spread the word. Distribute this video to everyone you know. Pick up the phone and call a few friends and suggest they visit therealnews.com. Invest just 10 minutes a day to ask friends and colleagues to join the campaign to create a truly independent source of internet and television news. Together, we can build this network. Just 50,000 people at $10 a month gets us to our first level of sustainability. You can help us reach this goal, and when we do, we'll move to television in millions of homes across North America. Help us reach an audience in the millions. Please contribute generously. Spread the word. Let's make the Real News television network a reality.
Your tax-deductible donation makes it possible. Please contribute at therealnews.com.